right, you should be good to go.
Stephen?
Hi.
Hello? Cool. Feel free to start whenever you're ready.
All right, so I'll share my screen here. Okay. So, hi everybody. Good
Sorry, the stream isn't
afternoon,
loading.
good morning, good night, depending on the time zone you're in. I'm in Europe, Spain, so hi from Europe. I'm Stephen. I'm going to talk about
Excuse me?
what we can do with... Yeah, sure.
The stream isn't loading. Could you stop the stream and start it again?
Is there something I should do?
Yeah, it's not showing up on my end, so I won't be able to record it unless you click stop stream on your Discord and then start stream again.
I didn't click stream. I shared screens, but didn't click. Let's see. Let's lower the frame rate. Maybe it's that. Okay. There it should be again.
It's not showing up for me, unfortunately.
People are writing in the chat that they can see it.
Yeah, it seems like it's working for other people, but if I'm not able to see it, we can't get a recording of it. Let me try rejoining the call. Hopefully that helps.
All right.
Yeah, it's just not loading for me.
Well, we can just get it started, Wang, if it's all right. Just so we don't keep the audience waiting. But once it figures out, we'll just take the part that you did manage to record in, post that on YouTube.
Yeah, okay, sure.
All right, I'll start then. GPT and the Chat GPT API in Python programs. So check. There we are. All right. So quickly about me, I live and work in Twitter handle is Steven2358, and I put some scripts in a GitHub repo, which are the ones that we will be taking a look at. So I'm posting this on the chat if anybody wants to download or check the scripts or follow along. So before I start with the scripts and the code, I would like to there's a lot of companies and models involved in this area. I will be focusing on OpenAI, mainly because they are pioneer in several, in the field of generative AI, and they have several models that are Chat GPT. Now, just for some more references, I have a whole list of generative AI resources, which is linked here at the bottom of the slide. Now, about the slides, I will post the slides on the same GitHub repo as I posted earlier. Now, if you have been using ChatGPT, you probably already have this. And when you do so, you will get $5 in free credit from OpenAI. And this is important because every time you're going to make an API call, you will spend some credits, typically cents, but it's something to take into account. This is not a free API. So once we have the account, we must, well, if you don't have it, you have to verify your phone number, etc., your email. Once you have the account, you can go to the playground, which is typically the first step that we would like to do. So this is basically a space where we can experiment. Now, I will be showing some screenshots of all of this. I haven't prepared to do this live because things can go wrong. So this is the playground, and my apologies for the change in light. There is not a this playground does not have a dark theme yet, so we have to see it in this very light version. Now, what we have here is the typical interface of the OpenAI playground. And as you can see there, we have a big text field where we can write our prompt. So I write a recipe for a strawberry cake. So if I press the green button below there, it will start writing in the style that we know from ChatGPT, for instance. So we'll start writing something like this. Now, these are screenshots. We cannot see it in action here. Give me the ingredients, then all the instructions to prepare this strawberry cake. Great. This is not a chat yet. This is simply a completion. So I write a prompt, and then the model gives me the text that it thinks should come next. So it's important to take into account here. It's a simple input and output process. And what the model tries here, actually, it is trained to provide the next word. When I would say write a recipe for a strawberry cake, it will give me the next word that it thinks is most likely, and then the next, and the next, and next, and so on. And because it's a very internally, it's hugely complex. It can generate these very long texts. You probably tried this already. It obviously doesn't only work for strawberry cake. You can give it any headline for an article, any prompt for writing an essay, and it will complete this. This has been known and has been well known since GPT-3 launched. So let me focus then a little bit on what we see at the right side of this slide.
Quick little thing. We have a question in the chat. Someone asked, can we create videos using this API based off of what they type?
Let me check the question. Can we create videos using this API? I'm not sure if I understand the question exactly. We can record our screen when we're seeing this. I'm not sure if you want to create a video file or create a video of what is happening. Animated video. Okay, that's maybe a more advanced question. Right. So this cannot. So this API is not suitable for creating videos. The API works for generating images, which I will show at the end of the talk. I have an example. For generating video, there are some apps that you can use already. Most famously, I think it's called Gen 2. You can see that on the repo, on the awesome list I talked about earlier. But here you cannot do it because it's based on it's focused on text generation, code generation, image generation, and image text transcription. So if there's time in the Q&A afterwards, we can talk about it if needed. So I'm going to continue with this interface here. So at the right-hand side, we have the options. So most importantly, we choose between complete or chat. So complete is simply the model that if we give it a prompt, it gives us a response and there's no conversation possible. If we change that to chat, we get the Chat GPT, which we are typically interested in, which can give us a conversation. I'll get to that in a moment. So we have that, the mode. Also, there's one parameter, temperature. Temperature is a parameter that lets us choose between a more creative response. If we set the temperature high, then we will give the model a lot of freedom to find something too creative. It will use a lot of randomness there. If we set the temperature low, we will see that it is more focused, more deterministic. Typically, we will set the temperature low if we think that there is only one possible good response. Now, what else do we have here? There's a button on top, View Code. If we click that, we get our first code, which is what we want to see today. This is Python code, and if we run this from our own environment, we will make the call to the OpenAI API, and we will get the response as the one we saw in green highlighted earlier. So we can send it a prompt and get a response. Now, interestingly, this requires very few packages. On top, we can see we need operating system and OpenAI. Then we retrieve our key somehow. I will talk about that in a minute. And we make a single request to the OpenAI API. We say we want the model DaVinci 3. We give it a prompt, a temperature, and some parameters. Now, about that line number 4, we have to pass it an OpenAI key. So that is a key you have to generate on the platform. So you would go here to the this URL where you can generate API keys. Typically, you will create one that is a temporary key. It will be valid for a few months, but you can revoke it if somehow it gets leaked, for instance. And we want to avoid that this gets leaked. So we should not store this in a text file. We should store this in a key management system, or typically we can store it as an environment variable in our own environment. I was using Conda for when I wrote the script. So if anybody else is using Conda, in this link you can find instructions of how to store the key in your environment, the API key. Now, back to the playground then, because we were interested in ChatGPT. Now, if I choose at the right, if I choose mode chat, we will get a slightly different interface. We get an additional window on the left, which is system. Now, that is where we can set a style. We can say, in general, how we want the model to act, and we can add some personality or some style. Just for trying, I told it I wanted the style of Shakespeare. My query in the middle of the screen is what is daylight savings time, just to see what it says. You can see it at just at the left of my query, it says user. That's because I'm the user. I'm asking that prompt. If I press submit button in green below, I get the response completely in Shakespearean style. Now, this is again, it's a question and response type of interaction. If we want to have a whole conversation, the API is not completely prepared yet. Let me go back one slide. So there's a button here that says add message. What we can do here is create a conversation by writing all the messages. So the first one is the user, that would be us. Then we could write the response from the assistant, which is ChatGPT, the response that we are expecting. And we could write a lot of messages here, simulating an entire conversation. And then when we press submit, we will get the next message. But it's not completely conversational apart from that way of working. So if we want to have a real chatbot, here we cannot get it yet. So a real chatbot would be when I press this, when I press submit, I get the response, and then I can continue the conversation. That is not possible yet. I will see where that interferes with our code. So I'm going to go to the scripts now. These scripts are located in the GitHub repository I shared earlier. So it's Stephen2358 / ChatGPT Workshop. And the first script is a simple hello world. So I'm gonna go over the lines of code here, but I assume that some of the people in the audience are beginner programmers, and I assume that others among you are experts. So I will try to explain it for the beginners mostly. Packages, we're loading our key, and then we sent our question to the API, as we saw before in that pop-up we saw with the code. So the only thing I'm asking, I'm not even saying what the system is supposed to be, what personality is supposed to have. I'm only saying there's one message, role as the user, so I am saying this. And the content, which is the prompt, is say hello world in the style of a pirate. Just because we can ask it for a style, I'll try this. So if we do that, we get in our console, well, this is my console from earlier. I have my environment here called generative, and I call the command Python with the argument script01 helloworld.py. When I call this, it might think for a second or two because it has to generate that response. Then I might get something like this. Obviously, if you tried Hello World before in other languages, it's always pretty short, but here you can say that it ends with Ahoy World, which we will understand is what a pirate would say. So that's Hello World. It works. Let's go to something more interesting. Let's try a chatbot. So we did only a single request to the API here. In order to get a chatbot, we should have some kind of a loop. So I have this script here based on one that can be found on the internet, but it's mostly the same code. We can see that there's okay, now there's a loop at line 10. We have a while loop, and it will loop forever until the user presses or asks for exit, which we can see on line 13. So here the system will, in every iteration of the loop, the system will ask, what is your question? And then we can write something. If we say exit, then it stops. But we can write our question, and then it will answer. So our question goes into the variable question on line 11, which is then sent to the API on line, starting line 18. We send the entire query, and it's using the method chat completion, or the module chat completion, and the method create. Also, we're using the model GPT 3.5 Turbo here, which will I'll compare it later with the other ones. And well, as you can see, the question is inserted in line 22. And finally, in line 27, and we're still inside of the loop, we will print the response. The response is hidden inside the variable completion. It's in the first element of the choices list, in the message, in the content, etc. So if we try this, I'm going to try this here. We try script number 2. And so it says, what is your question? Okay, my question is, why is the sky blue? If I press, then produce something like this. It says, because of a phenomenon called Rayleigh scattering, etc., etc. Now, that is great. Now, small caveat. I must mention that often the response might be wrong, and it will not give us any hint that it is wrong. It will simply write confidently about something. So anytime it tells you a fact like this, you should fact check this. Still, this looks pretty okay, but since we're in a loop, then it says, what is your question? So what is the next question? I could go on here. I could write, okay, tell me a little bit more about that Rayleigh scattering, or explain more in detail what you said earlier. Now, something important here is, and I mentioned it earlier, the API is not completely conversational. So if I write a new question now, it will start from scratch. It will have forgotten what we wrote before. That is not really what we want. So we have to talk about memory. So in the previous script, number 2, the chatbot has no memory. Every time we're in that loop, and every time we call this one here, OpenAI.chatCompletion.create, it will start from scratch. It will have forgotten completely what we have said before. And that is how the API works at this moment. So I showed that, well, I mentioned that we could send it a part of an entire conversation and then ask for the next message. And that is actually what we have to do. So this is an example of a part of a conversation where we send several messages. So as you can see, there's 4 messages that start with the keyword role. So the first one says it's the role is the system, so it tells what style we want in general. And then we have the role, which is the user. The user would ask the first question. Then we have role assistant. The assistant would provide a reply. So the user asks, who won the World Series in 2020? ChatGPT replies, the Los Angeles Dodgers won the World Series in 2020. And then we can add another message. Now, we're all doing this by hand at this point, or automated in some way, but we're sending this entire query to the system. And the last message here would be another question. Where was it played? Now, if we send this whole part of the conversation, then it will have the entire context, obviously, because we're sending all at the same time. And then it will be able to elaborate a new response. And that is the way it works right now. So if you can imagine, if the conversation goes on for a long time, this list is growing, and we will make API calls that have a lot of information. So if we go back to our script for a moment, what we would be doing here is basically keeping a running memory of the entire conversation, and we would somehow have a growing list of messages and pass that to the API call. So the code that I'm showing here is not entirely correct, but as you can see, we would be having a variable that is called memory. That would be a list here in Python, and we would append to that list every question and every answer. And then when the part that's not correct is where it says role, etc. We would somehow have to reformulate that to make it a growing, every time bigger request to the API. Now, that is one option, keeping all the messages in memory. Another option, which is very popular, is using vector databases. Now, I won't talk in detail about that because that would be a little outside of the scope of my talk, which is quite basic now. There are a lot of services that provide vector database, and they allow us to store information of ChatGPT inside their database, and it's we can treat it more or less as an external memory. And if you look into scripts that do conversational chats with these APIs, you will often come across vector databases. So that's as far as chats we could have here and conversations. I'm going to show another example because obviously we can do a lot of things with this API. So there is this service. If you go to the website chatpdf.com, there's this very interesting service where you can upload a PDF and then you can chat with it. That's chatpdf.com if you want to see it. Now, something very similar can be made in Python using the API with the code I'm showing right now. So this is a code. It's not a code to ask questions about the PDF, but it's a code that simply summarizes a PDF. You can imagine that if you store information about the PDF, the modifications needed in the code to ask questions about the PDF are minimal. So I will just give this example. So what this code does is it has a loop that goes over the pages of PDF, reads every page and summarizes every page, and then adds it to a summary. So on line 9 you can see a variable that's PDF summary text, and what it will do is it will read. So on line 12 we have a PDF file which is opened, and then on line 16 we have this loop that starts. So it will go from page 1 till the last page, and basically what it will do is it will use a PDF reader package like PyPDF2, which I used here, to read every page individually, extract the text, and then send the query to the OpenAI API that says summarize this. That's on line 23. Summarize this, and then the entire text of the page. The OpenAI API will respond with a paragraph of text, and we can simply append that to our list here, and that's on line 28. And in the end, we will write that to a text file, and if you open the file, we will have one paragraph or one long phrase that summarizes every page. Now, this might be interesting if we have to handle a lot of documents, but I assume that you can see that this can be applied to other cases. For instance, if we access a website, we can extract the text of the website and we can start interacting in a similar way as we did here with that website. We can summarize it, we can look for information on it by code that is very similar to this one. Now, the model I used here, as you can see on line 21, is GPT 3.5 Turbo. A quick word on that. So it's actually it's a chat model, but it is that optimized that it is actually much faster than the previous GPT-3 based text. So as it says here, this chat-based text, the 3.5, has similar performance to DaVinci 3, which is older, but since it's that much optimized, it's 10 times cheaper, which is interesting. If you're going to try these models, you have to, well, there's a page on the website of the API that tells you how much of the credits you're spending. So you should take that into account. GPT 3.5 Turbo is always preferred over DaVinci 3, I think. Then there's another one, GPT-4, which is much more capable in writing sophisticated text. So if you're going to use this, for instance, for translations, the prompt would be asking it to do some translation, but the code we saw would be just the same. You would just ask it to translate the text. GPT-4, in my experience, is much stronger than GPT 3.5 Turbo. But as you can see here on the slide, it's a lot more expensive. It's from what I saw, it's 30 times more expensive. Now, that's a lot. And if you use it, you will see that these APIs charge by the number of tokens. Now, tokens are small bits. Well, if you give it a phrase, it is chopped up in tokens, which can be short words or even syllables of words. And if you're using the API, it will charge you depending on the amount of tokens that are in your query and in the response. It will sum both of these. Now, I showed some basic scripts here. There's a lot of more scripts that you can find on the internet. So here are some links that are also interesting. The first one gives a similar repository, a similar, well, it's not a script, it's a bundle of scripts. That's a project that you can use to explore GitHub repositories, and you can ask questions about it. It means in the same sense that I asked for summaries of the PDF. In that code, you can find everything you need to explore GitHub repositories through the OpenAI API. Now, And on the bottom of the slide, I mentioned something that I think is a very interesting evolution, and those are autonomous agents. Now, I think these are interested, apart from the fact that they're very interesting experiments in the sense of artificial intelligence. Their code base is very compact. If you take a look, for instance, at the last one here, MicroGPT, you will see that that the basic code is very short. It's less than 100 lines, and that's the entire project. And half of the lines are an elaborate prompt, and the other half are instructions on how to process the prompt and a big loop that runs over it. Now, having seen all these examples, I must mention also that all the documentation is on the platform there on this link, and I will summarize now what we can do with this API. So we have these 6 use cases here. I already talked about the chat, which is the first one. There we would use this command, which is chat completion.create. And as I told, there's some limitations now because it's not fully conversational. We always have to give the entire list of previous messages. But we can use this 3.5 model, which is very capable. So the next use case is text completion, which is a very similar instruction. That's the original one that was launched with GPT-3 on this platform. It's very useful. The next is embeddings. Now, embeddings are something more. It's something more advanced. If you're going to train machine learning models, for instance, we will need embeddings to store our information. I will not go into detail because it's much more advanced. So next icon in red is the use case of speech to text. Now that is very useful, but I wouldn't say it's generative AI. What it does is if you give it an audio recording of a voice or a conversation, it will provide you with the transcription, which means it will give you the text corresponding to that recording. I don't think that's generative AI because in generative AI, typically we have a random component and there's some creation of unique content. Here, it's simply giving you the text that corresponds to the recording. There's no creativity involved here. There's only accuracy involved, we could say. Still, this is very interesting. And yeah, why is it included here? Well, basically, this is part of the same project. Lots of times when we use this, because this compensates pretty well the other use cases. For instance, if we want to build an app where we can speak to ChatGPT, we will need a front that has we will need a first module that does speech to text, and then we will turn the text. We will pass the text to ChatGPT, but we will need this first module that is the speech to text with this model called Whisper. Next, the fifth one, that's image generation. That is of course true generative AI. And if we use this instruction, OpenAI.image.create, we will be accessing the DALL-E model directly. So I have a last example on using this instruction, and I'll show that on the next slide. Just before that, the last use case is fine-tuning. Now, this is also very interesting if we want to train machine learning models, for instance. If you have a lot of data and now we want a chat model or a completion model that works specifically on our data, we can take that large language model, and we can fine-tune it on our data. So that's also an advanced topic, so I won't go into detail. But just to finish then, a quick example of how we can do image generation, and that's the fourth script included in the repository I showed you. So it's a very short script. It starts with the same lines, and then there's the command to generate an image. On line 8, we can see it. We We provide instruction openai.image.create. Then we give the prompt. Well, I wrote this one here, award-winning picture of a T-Rex playing a ukulele. N equals 1 means I want just one image, and we can give it the size. Now it gives us a response, and that response contains a URL. And when we execute the script, it will print the URL on our screen, which we can copy and paste in our browser, and we can see the image. So that's it for this quick intro into the OpenAI and ChatGPT APIs. And yes, if you wonder what picture came out, it's this one. So thank you for your attention, and I'll be answering your questions now. Okay, I will read what I see in the chat. What is fine-tuning? Fine-tuning means if we have fine-tuning means if we want to take this big general model that is that works for everything, and if we want to use it for a specific use case. Imagine that you want to let's see. I have to think of an example now, right? Imagine that you have a lot of text about. Well, imagine that you have archived a magazine with literature on maybe some kind of stories in which people. Yeah. Imagine that you have a lot of text from magazines that are stories of people traveling, for instance, and it's a typical style. Now, fine-tuning means you're going to take the big model that is provided here, and you're going to show it that you want its responses to be more like the style you're providing it. So you will give it all these texts that you have that are in a particular style on a particular topic, and you will somehow train it to be more specific. That would be fine-tuning. I hope that more or less answers your question. Model in which form I read there. Not sure what that means. The fine-tuning, if your question is about which models can be fine-tuned, in this API, it's the text model. It's the completion model, which can be fine-tuned. The chat, the conversational model cannot be fine-tuned yet. But for instance, if you have a newspapers archive, you can fine-tune this on newspapers, so it learns that style. I hope that answers your question. I'm going to go to the next one. Is the OpenAI API using only Python? No, it's not only using Python. Let me check. If I go to the playground and see the code. So I showed this screenshot. If you press Python here, you will see that it also gives you JavaScript, which would be node.js code, and it can also give you this information in JSON or curl format. But I believe it's JavaScript and Python at this point. Okay, how can we contact you? All right, how can you contact me? You can drop me a link on Twitter if you want, or my Twitter is there. On GitHub, it's here as well. Yeah, I'm on these social networks. So if you send me a tweet, I will answer as soon as I can. Working on your startup in the field of edtech using AI ML. That's great. Well, shoot me a message. Can you provide LinkedIn or mail or something? I will write that in the chat. Can we work with Java? Yes. Well, I must confess, I don't know. I think we're only a Google search away from that answer. I'm not sure if it can be, but I would be surprised if there wasn't a way to do that, because people write these connectors all the time. I cannot answer you out of let me check. Well, it does JavaScript. I don't think it doesn't do Java out of the box, but I'm sure somebody has made a connector. As you know, this field is very much in evolution, and people are building thousands, tens of thousands of projects on top of this. You searched it already? Okay, that's great. So I'm going to, I think there are no more questions, so I'm going to paste my LinkedIn in the chat for people that want to contact me there. There you go. And yeah, any more questions? I think we still have some time.
Well, I guess there's a couple of people typing, so we can just wait for them. But yeah, so we'll post all of the stuff. Stephen, if you could send me the slides, that'd be great. We'll be posting into our Discord as well, if that's
Sure.
all right. So they can, just because the first part of the workshop wasn't recorded, but yeah.
Yeah,
So
I will.
Sorry, go on.
I will send the slides, and also I will upload them to the repository, so they will be there as well. I'll send them to you, Brandon, so you'll have them.
Cool. And then is there anything, well, I guess, do you want me to also send your GitHub as well?
That's okay. I mean, it's public. It's in the slides, so
That's true. Sounds good. Alrighty. Thank you so much for talking. And I know it's late for you because you're all the way out there in Spain, but it was great. And I appreciate it a lot. And talk to you again soon.
That was fun. I will check the hackathon after my good night rest. Have fun over there, and maybe see you tomorrow. Bye, guys.
Yep.